Yay.
Hey, hello. We are now recording and looking so much forward to today's program. This is Nick Curto, your host, and I'm from Disclosure Network, New York. And we've been going now for 27 years here in Manhattan, but we now have people, members. It's a membership group, and they're from Europe, Hawaii, and all over the United States, and a few from Canada. So we're really looking forward to that. And there's going to be more people that are joining us. In fact, two new members joined the other day. So very excited about that. Now, Kimberly, I'm trying to put you in the main. Let's see if I can do that here. Um, uh, um, okay. All right. Okay. A little. Why is that not happening? I don't understand that. Give me a second, guys. Sorry about this. Don't know why that is going on. Uh, those tools. Um,
Nick, could you introduce her,
well,
perhaps?
I'm going to, but I need to.
Oh.
I wanted to get her on screen,
I can see her.
Yeah, we all could see her.
right? But we're featuring other people, not our guests. That's the problem. Um,
If she,
why that? Why
are you
that?
trying to put her on so she's full screen when she talks?
Yes, I am.
Well, she would
Exactly.
have to do gallery.
I think what I've done in the past is you click on
There you
participants
go.
and then next to the name, there's a pin option.
There you go.
Oh,
And we
okay.
got you now. Okay, Kimberly, so good to have you here. I look so forward to this interview. Please, would you say your last name so we get the whole name correctly said?
It's Kimberly Schipke. It's like car key, but for a ship.
Okay.
Schipke,
Schipke. Where is that from? Or what is that? Where is that?
German.
Okay, very good. Where were you born and where do you live now?
I was born in the Black Hills of South Dakota and moved to Ohio for a few years when I was very young, but I was raised in Tupelo, Mississippi, and currently back in Tupelo, Mississippi now. So in between, I've traveled all over the world. My passport had to get extra pages and is like this thick. So I've bounced all over the world, but I have kind of circled back to Mississippi. I love the hospitality, people, wave and, in the car driving by, good mornings, good afternoons, and some soul music and soul food. I enjoy that slower pace of life and that sense of community there.
It sounds wonderful. It really does. And but you've been all over the world. Now I got to ask you why? Why were you traveling that far? Was it for education purposes, or what was the purpose of that traveling like you did or do?
Well, I'll give you a little bit more background on my
Sure.
research. So I have an undergraduate and bachelor's and master's degree in biomedical engineering. I'm minored in mathematics and Spanish. And my first job after college was overseeing clinical trials for big pharmaceutical companies. So I moved to Colorado Springs after I graduated, and that's where I was working as a compliance officer. So I would listen to the study drug versus the placebo for 6 hours in the evening and how many people died in the studies, how many people's faces twitching, tongue swollen,
Oh,
hospitalized,
wow.
those types of things for twice a week. And it was a lot. Luckily, the company that I worked for, they were taken to court by the government agency for oversight because the company wasn't overseeing clinical trials properly. So we were taken to court alongside the FDA, and afterwards the FDA came in and shut us down. That whole scandal happened before I even started working there, so I had,
Wow.
I feel like my hands are clean
Right, right.
from that. But and so while I was working there, I had taken a trip to California and I was at dinner and I had a seizure and died. turned purple, stopped breathing, heart stopped. And
Wow.
someone had to give me mouth to mouth. And his name was Eric Darwin, and he's related to Charles Darwin, which I thought was kind of a fun fact after I came back to life. But the hospitals and the doctors, they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. They said it could be a brain tumor, but we know you don't have insurance. Do you want to pay for a CAT scan? And I was like, nope.
Oh,
So, because I was living in Colorado, I went up to Boulder because they're kind of known for alternative therapies. And I talked to a chiropractor, and he was like, well, what medications are you on? And the only thing that I took was birth control pills, and I'd been taking them since I was 16. So about 8 years, I had been taking birth control pretty religiously. And he said, well, do you have this, and this? And I was like, all of those things. And he said, well, it's the birth control pill. It's depositing into the pineal gland in your brain,
wow.
and that's what caused it. So it sparked me on to a whole magical mystery ride of, with he did some acupuncture, and I could feel like electricity flowing through my brain. And the biomedical engineer in me was like, how did this work? So I went to a conference and met Dr. Elizabeth Rauscher. She did research with the Stargate project with Stanford Research Institute for remote viewing. And she also developed an external pacemaker. So she had 2 dislocated knees, and I wanted to learn more about this whole side of science that I didn't even know really existed. And I asked her if I could spend a month with her in Apache Junction. I said, I'll cook, I'll clean, I just want to learn, as much as I can. So she took me under her wing, and I started learning more about the biofield, the energy field that's around the body that you can't see, and was invited to India to do some research at the World Peace Center at the Maharashtra Institute of Technology in Pune. And so I was kind of going back and forth to India. There's also some going to England and France and Australia, New Zealand, South Africa. I started studying using thermal imaging, an infrared camera, to be able to monitor the heat, like the thermosphere of the human body that's outside of the visible spectrum, but I'll be watching the weather patterns on the body and how they were shifting, like in the hands of a Qigong master, when they, with the thought, were able to increase the temperature in the palms of their hands. Or acupuncture, seeing a lot of heat in the knee, a lot of inflammation and soreness and pain, and then people putting acupuncture needles into the knee and then watching that heat dissipate out of the knee. So then I was asked to present at these different conferences in Brazil and Norway and all over the world. So that's what got me traveling and learning and finding all kinds of different ways of more energy-based healing techniques. And I never really liked chemistry when I was in college. Like, it finally started to make sense when I finally got to biochem, but like Chem 1, 2, Organic 1, 2, like I had, I was all straight A's except for chemistry. I'd make B's in chemistries, which, a lot of people are happy with B's, but I was not happy with a B, but I loved physics so much. I had to take 3 classes of physics, biophysics, thermodynamics, a lot of those classes when I was in college, and I just loved physics much more than chemistry. So when I met a woman who was using tuning forks to tune the body like an instrument back in 2011, I was kind of like, wow, this actually makes sense. I can hear the changes in the tone when she would move the tuning fork in different places in my field. And so I kind of dove into working with coherent sound with the tuning forks, and then became a teacher and was teaching with biofield tuning for many years. And then when 2020 happened, I was like, well, why don't I, it was like everything had to stop. So I started thinking, well, what if I start adding coherent light? So I started working with a green laser and giving the body 2 forms of coherent input. And I was like, wow, I can do that much more adding light. So for the past few years, I've been working in developing the spectrochrome laser, and that's probably a really long introduction.
No,
But
it's an
that's kind of
incredible
been
story.
my journey of discovery and my kind of global travel around the world and back to Mississippi. There's a quote from William Faulkner, and it says, in order to understand the world, you must first understand a place like Mississippi. So I've traveled the world, and I'm back in Mississippi, and I'm still trying to understand it.
I gotta say right off the bat, Kimberly, and I didn't realize the background that you just told us about. And please write the book,
Mhm.
really, because
Yeah.
it needs to be a book. Your journey is amazing of survival, of discovery, of really deeply doing a deep dive into what is going on in my body and science, and then really getting into that. I think that is an amazing book slash movie. Really, I do think so. It's an exciting, amazing journey. And again, you're in the middle of it now. You're not even completed your journey, but what you've done so far is truly amazing.
Well,
Absolutely amazing.
that's just the highlights. There's definitely been, even more things that have happened to me where I'm like, is this really my life? And where I don't think people would even believe me, some of the things that have happened to me. But
Well,
yeah,
the expression, you couldn't make it up. You just can't make this stuff up. It applies to you too. It absolutely
absolutely.
does.
Absolutely. And people are like, well, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I'm like, I have no idea.
Mhm.
I
Right.
can't go that far into the future. I find, if I try to make plans, a friend of mine told me, God laughs at your plans. And so and it's true, because there's been so many things that I thought, I was going to plan to do, and nothing even close to it happened. And honestly, it's kind of been a blessing that some of the things that I thought I wanted, didn't happen. It's those kind of unanswered prayers. But yeah, I kind of just roll with it. Is what I've learned, to just kind of surrender and see how the spirit moves me. And it's Julie and Michael had invited me up here to New York, and I felt the pull, and I'm like, absolutely, Julian, I'll come up and hang out. And I've met some amazing people, yourself included, Nick, and it's been quite a journey. So um, excited to be here. And yes, I will at some point write a book. I just started a podcast earlier
Oh, good.
this last week,
Oh,
where I offer a free distance tune-up to anybody who listens. So I can share that link with you afterwards, and maybe you can share it with your audience. But it's one that I'd recommend going ahead and laying down, getting comfy, and then just closing your eyes, and I'll talk you through it. I do a lot of work and kind of encouraging you to envision going from infinity and beyond to infinity and beyond. So it's a very kind of cosmic tune-up, I find.
how do people, because this is going to be on YouTube and other areas also, how can people get in touch with you, or is there a website now? What can they do to learn more about your work?
Well, my main website is called biofieldlab.com. Lab is in laboratory, and biofield as in like the aura. That's also what my Spotify channel is. That's where that group tune up that I was just mentioning. If you go to Spotify and you look up Biofield Lab, that's where you'd find that free tune up. And then I also, with the green laser and the tuning forks, there's a website is called buygreenlaser.com, BUY, greenlaser.com. The laser's name is Spectrochrome Laser. And I bought that website and with spectrochromelaser.com, and my friends were like, nobody's gonna know how to spell that, Kimberly. So, so we
Just
switched.
for clarity, because I know that some people, including myself sometimes, when someone gives their a long address, sometimes they think, is it an EL or LE? Could you just for clarity, just again just by letter, just go through that so that it's very clear how to get a hold of you. And would you do that for me now?
Sure. So Buy Green Laser is BUYGREENLASER.com. And the first website is Biofield Lab. It's BIOFIELDLAB.com.
Thank you very much. I was looking for a doctor for a particular question I had, and I got a hold of a major hospital, and they are on an AI robotic answering machine. It was a absolute nightmare, and you couldn't. The robotic voice would ask you a few questions that had nothing to do with why you had called, and then gave you three choices, and none of those choices were something that you wanted. And it was just totally nuts. And then they said, "Oh, and we have four phone numbers," and they went ba 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 and ba ba ba. And it was like insane. Nobody could possibly write all that down. And it was like there was no human saying you've got to go slower so that people can have a chance to really get it correct.
Exactly.
It was almost like a Saturday Night Live skit, like a comedy skit, only it was my life and it was real. So I just had to finally hang up and try another way to finally get through to a human being. So anyhow, and
Yeah, you have to
that
hit
just
zero
happened.
several times or just say it, talk to a representative. The other thing I wanted to mention, if people wanted to email me
Sure.
personally, it is basically my name. It's Kimberly.Schipke@gmail.com. So if you see my name on the lower part of the screen, it's
Yep.
KIMBERLY dot SCHIPKE@gmail.com. It's
Oh, thank you.
probably going to
Thank
be
you.
the best way to reach me one-on-one.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I'll be doing that too. I'm very interested in your work. Very interested. I think it's amazingly wonderful that you've gone into this and the process, the journey that you've taken. Really, how wonderful that is. And I got to tell you, Kimberly, that when I started looking at my life recently and looking back, the funny thing is that all the different places where I could have made 10 different choices and the choice I made led me the right way, put me on the right path to the next level. And it seems to me as though you've kind of done the same thing. Whether by hook or crook, one thing led to the next, and it was the right place. And then you went to the next step and you had some choices, and it bing, 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 bing. It makes a great deal of sense now. Did you find that?
I do tell people that dying was one of the best things that ever happened to me. Like having that event, like who knows what my life would have evolved into had I not had that experience where I kind of had that restart, that reboot. And then overseeing those clinical trials, there was a lot of people who, with bioengineering, they were telling me, Kimberly, you're good looking. Why don't you go and be a pharmaceutical sales rep? You could start out making 6 figures a year. And I was like, after overseeing the clinical trials and hearing, how many people died, I was like, I don't want to go out there and start selling these things after I've seen what they've done.
Right.
Like, no, like I'm not going out there for a quick buck, and then, I luckily had been able to save some money so that I could, and I've got this thirst for knowledge that, when after I got let go from that job and I met Dr. Elizabeth Rauscher, that I was like, I'm just going to use my savings and go and stay with her for a month and just take care, help her out around the house and learn as much as I could. And I had been at her house for 3 days and the whole house is lined with books of all kinds of like, she's a nuclear and astrophysicist. And so the titles are just, literally astronomical. And so I remembered I kept looking at the spiral bound book for 3 days. And finally, after 3 days, I pull the book off of the shelf and I look at it and she's kind of stunned that I pulled this out. It was the first one I pulled off of her shelf. And she said, "What made you pull that one?" I said, "I don't know. I've been staring at it for 3 days." And it was all of Nikola Tesla's patents.
Oh,
And she had printed them out herself and had them spiral bound. And I had been staying in Colorado Springs, so I was already a Nikola Tesla fan. I tried to go to his museum there, but it had gotten shut down. So for me to go and sit in her, lazy boy next to her, and then pull that book, of all of the books, pull that off of the shelf, I think we were both kind of stunned.
I love that story. Oh, that's amazing. That really is. It's just that sometimes it winds up. It almost writes itself at points.
Well, I mean, that also from then on, anytime I go and I'm at somebody's house and there's a bookshelf, I'm really good at letting magnetism, like where does my eye get pulled? I'm not just gonna go down and read all of the titles. I'm gonna see, oh, my eyes keeps getting drawn over to this spot on the shelf, and like, what is that? And start to get closer. And now I kind of, even with that book, I'll kind of spin through the pages and see which one I land on, and then read what's on that page. And usually it's something pretty interesting or something that's really meaningful to me in that moment. So I've learned to kind of do my book tarot of when I'm around different bookshelves. When I was with Elizabeth, we went up she lived in Apache Junction, Arizona. And I don't know if your viewers are very familiar with her work, but her and her husband, William Bice, they did some of the first research on the effects of AM and FM radio on brainwaves back in the 1970s. So they would hook people up, and then they would turn the radio on, but with no sound, so people wouldn't know when the radio was on or off, and they would monitor their brainwaves. And they found that there would be a desynchronization of the alpha brainwaves, and the amplitude would drop by like 10 to 30%. And so they were presented it to the first congressional hearing on radiation health and safety. And so for over 50 years, the US government has already knows that even AM and FM radio causes effects to the brain, to brainwave activity, and it put certain people in 6 hertz frequency associated with annoyance.
Oh,
And that's only gone up a billion times. So when cell phones came out, she started to speak out, and she was invited to speak on Larry King 2020, 60 Minutes, and people from the telecom industry came to her house with guns, and they threatened
oh
her
no.
life. So she packed up her stuff in North Carolina, and she moved to middle of nowhere, Apache Junction, Arizona, and was kind of in hiding. And so being able to see all of that research and hear her story, like it was pretty wild. So she was giving and donating a lot of her research to the World Research Foundation Library in Sedona. So I went with her to go see Steve Ross. I don't know if your viewers don't know who Steve Ross is. He's like the librarian of librarians. He's got ancient scrolls, really incredible. He was given the Royal Raymond Rife's microscope, and a lot of his handwritten notes, just mind-blowing. And at that time I was wanting to study more about the effects of light on the body. And he told me before we left, he said, "Your angels told my angels to give you these books."
Wow.
And it was Spectrochrometry Encyclopedia, Let There Be Light, and a book called Rainbow Colors of Light by Meher Master Moose. They were all three written by Zoroastrians. And within 6 months, 7 months, I was invited to Mumbai and was able to meet Mayor Master Moose, who wrote The Rainbow Colors of Light, and started studying there with the Zoroastrians. And that was and studying their universal divine laws of light and sound. So, and now working with, lasers and tuning forks, coherent light and coherent sound, that is kind of an interesting journey 15 years later. And that's what I'm working with. But spectrochrometry was developed by Dinshaw Gadiali, and he was using full spectrum lights and then putting different color filters in front to help heal the body. And he'd always start, if somebody comes in, he would always use green for the first color tonation for 1 hour, full body green, because green is the middle of the spectrum. If anything's overactive or underactive, it can help try to bring the body back to that neutral. And then after that first session, if a part of the body was still kind of sluggish and not doing, as active as it needs to be, then he would use the red, orange, yellow, those kind of hot colors that are closer to the infrared spectrum. Use those hot colors to help stimulate those parts of the body more. Or if something was overactive and needed to kind of calm down, then he would use that blue, indigo, violet, and those kind of colder colors closer to the ultraviolet range to help kind of cool those areas down. But there were certain contraindications for red. So if somebody's central nervous system, if people were already stressed out, all of their sensory organs were all like overactive, you would never want to put red onto the face, onto the brain. And so right now we're seeing a lot more of these red light therapies that are shining into people's faces for beauty, because it does stimulate cell reproduction. But are they going mental? So I'm one of those who's like, do no harm. So with my laser, it's a green laser to be able to, be able to help things without hurting anybody in any way. I don't want anybody to be overstimulated. And then blue, there's also contraindications where it can slow down your circulatory system. It can slow down your immune system. So I don't want to, kind of mess around with anything other than green. So I named my laser the Spectrochrome laser, after Dinshaw Gadiali and his work with spectrochrometry, just because I want to bring more attention to his work that was, over 100 years ago. He was doing this work here in New York.
Again, incredible. I'm so curious more about your research with the animals and birds, also the people and the things that you were starting to address and how that worked out. So if you could give us a little bit of that, we'd be grateful.
Well, the first animal that I ever tried to work on, it was actually with a tuning fork. It had always been on my bucket list to ride an elephant.
Okay.
So I was in Sri Lanka and the opportunity presented itself for me to be able to ride an elephant. But then I saw all of the chains around the feet and over the shoulders of
Oh,
these
boy.
elephants. And I was like, I don't want to give money to these people who are like torturing these elephants or like ride them and make their life even worse. So I'd asked the people, I said, they're like, do you want to ride? And I said, no, but can I tune them? And so they said, you can, but you just, you can't get close to them. And I was like, that's okay, because I work in the field. And so I first worked on the male elephant, and it was almost like a cartoon where the first strike of the tuning fork and I started to interact with the field, the elephant's eyes just went like this.
Wow.
You could tell he was like, what is this white girl doing? And so, but I worked in the brow. And he kind of calmed down after a little while. And there was the female elephant. She was watching me the whole time I was working on him. And then when I worked on her, her eyes were more, as she was looking at me, it was more like a knowing and an understanding. It was really quite a beautiful thing. But I've worked on hybrid wolves where I was, working putting the tuning forks on one of the hips. And sometimes when animals are done, then they'll just kind of get up and walk away. But this wolf got up and I was like, oh, maybe we're done. And it rolled over and it gave me its other hip and was looking back at me like, get this one
Wow.
too. So
That's
it
incredible.
was kind of cute to be able to work on that wolf. And I've helped dogs who were in a wheelchair. They had some spinal injuries. They had actually gotten dogs from Afghanistan who had been in an explosion. And so I just used some tuning forks and walked up the spine of this dog, not knowing, what would happen. And then next thing I know, I'm standing in the parking lot and I see this dog walking without a wheelchair. And I was like, what? It it was pretty mind blowing. And then I've worked on horses, and some of this work I've done from a distance. So I was in, I believe I was in Colorado, and this woman that I had a horse that was one of the police horses from London, and it had blinders on for most of its life, and now in its retirement, it was out in like the wide open spaces and was kind of freaked out by the other horses, and it's a kind of adrenals, kidneys and adrenals were really stressed out. And so I, over the phone, I'm kind of tuning in with a tuning fork, and I'm tuning into this horse's adrenals and helping them calm down. And I could hear the owner through the phone, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, it's going to drink some water. It's going to drink some water." And by the time I finished tuning the other adrenal, she was like, "It's going to lay down in the middle of the herd. Oh my gosh, it is laying down and sleeping in the middle of the herd." She could not believe it. And so trying to help kind of calm down these kidneys and adrenals of animals has been pretty heartwarming, and I'm happy to do that. I can do this work from a distance. I've helped horses with kind of bow-legged and really swollen joints, and kind of helping to ground some of that electricity and show it out those front hooves. Like within 24 hours, this horse was prancing around. And so I love that I can do this work from a distance. Like that's why I can travel so much, is, I can just get on the phone and tune anybody anywhere. I've woken people up from comas and overseas in Europe. I've melted uterine fibroids from Mississippi to Mumbai. They were in Mumbai in India, and I was in Mississippi, and dissolved several fibroids, and it's really rewarding work.
I
Nick?
love all the stories you have there. They're amazing. I love animals anyways. And there's a person who is an animal activist here in New York City. She's an old time member of our group, and she could not be here today. But I am so loving to have her see this video. I'm sure she's going to be communicating with you, because she's going to be very, very excited about your work for sure, as I am, and I'm sure many others are. Now, Kimberly, if it's okay, would you be all right if we asked a few questions from the group here?
Absolutely.
Okay, because I think that they might have some. So if you could just wave your hand and do it that way, and if there's any questions at the moment. 80, go ahead. 80's from Connecticut. 80, go ahead. Just speak up, please, now.
Sure. Gosh, I have so many questions. With that dog in the wheelchair, now, I was wondering what the similarity to sound frequency might be because I work with Vogel crystals, and I've healed animals at a distance, from a distance, probably with the light and the piezoelectric electricity. So there must be some similarity between a sound frequency, or is it intention? Are you working with angelic help? What do you think might be the interlocking connection by healing with two different modes?
Well, I think working, with light and sound, they're just different octaves of the same spectrum, is what I think of. In spectrochrometry encyclopedia, in that book, he correlated the wavelengths of light to wavelengths of sound. And so he was able to put the frequency vibration of light, and did the mathematical calculation. So I think they're kind of one and the same. They're just different octaves of the same thing. I do find that working with coherent light and sound has been, more of a game changer than working, with a broader spectrum of light, or a broader spectrum of sound. It's like using the coherent photons and coherent phonons, giving that body that coherent input. I think of with the tuning forks, like if I had a guitar that was in tune and somebody else's guitar was out of tune, I just keep giving them the in tune note, and then their body can sense where, oh wait, I don't sound like that, or that doesn't feel right. And the body can do whatever it needs to do to also become in tune.
Well,
And
yeah,
so I don't feel like I am kind of, using my intention, as far as what I'm tuning into with the tuning fork. Like if I'm tuning the adrenals, my brain is set to like hearing what the adrenals sound like. So there is some of that, like the biomedical engineer of me of like tuning my dial into what I want to tune into with the tuning fork. So that definitely plays a role on, who and where and time and space. And then the light is also, it's that coherent light in that middle of the spectrum. So if it's one way or the other, it's helping to bring the body back into that coherent, more neutral expression.
with the light now, to my knowledge, the speed of light is a constant. But when you break it down into different parts of the spectrum, is there a change in the speed of light?
I don't think so.
don't
I think,
so.
yeah.
Now, do you use one tuning fork or a variety?
I used to use a lot of different tuning forks, like when I was working up the spine, that was the Schumann resonance, like harmonics of the Schumann resonance, seventh and eighth, because
Seventh,
that curvature of the spine relates to the Schumann resonance. But I've kind of, in the last few years, kind of felt kind of drawn away from working with anything that's a harmonic of the Schumann, just because it's been all over the place. I don't know if you've seen, like, there's been solar flares, and then the Schumann resonance is like through the roof. And so it's like if I've been trying to entrain people to this frequency, but then that frequency goes for a ride, it doesn't feel like the right thing to be using. So the frequencies that I've worked with have evolved throughout the years. The one that I work with now, and is on my website, I teach a course teaching people how to work with the coherent light and the coherent sound. It's called a coherency course. And so I work with the 111 hertz tuning fork, 111. And in numerology, that adds up to a 3 with the Nikola Tesla 3, 6, and 9. But the 111 hertz is also the resonant frequency of the oracle chamber in Malta in the hypogeum. So there's a chamber underground that they call the oracle chamber, and it's the resonance of the shape of the room. So the room resonates at this 111 hertz. And after I started working with this tuning fork, my phone kind of listens to me, and thank you for listening. And it shows me these kind of research science things, and it told me that there were over 200 elongated skulls that were found at this hypogeum in Malta. And I was like, that's where, that's the tuning fork that I'm working with. And, what does that mean? I don't even know, but I just find it interesting that, even just finding elongated skulls, that many in one place is kind of fascinating. And then that I've chosen, this tuning fork, in a place where something like that has happened as well.
I've been seeing 111 all over the place. And speaking of seeing, I don't usually see this, but I can see your aura. It's white and green all around your head, and it's glowing. Probably the white background makes it easy for me. White and green. Yeah, very cool. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
That's
Great
cool. That is
questions.
amazing. Wow. Wow. Another question. Anybody just raise your hand? Okay, Doreen, please go ahead and speak up so we can hear you clear.
Yes, Kimberly, so are you suggesting this is an ancient and new technique that people are using? And are like chiropractors, are other people using this? And it's not a cure-all for all diseases, is that correct? Or is it? What do you find?
I think that there's, we'll start with this ancient techniques. I think going back in time, the sound of drums and how, tribes would use vibration to kind of break up, if there was any congestion in the field, they could come and like bang on that drum around that part of the body that may have hurt, just to kind of help break up kind of the pressure and and density in that part of the energy field, because that's also what it feels like when I bring in a tuning fork, because it feels like I'm hitting like a high pressure system. You know, I'm hitting like a dense cloud here, and then the tuning fork kind of helps break it up and kind of open and release some of that energy and tightness there. And then as far as this being a cure-all, I think that it can help in a lot of different ways. And in my health, you know, I've helped people get off, tune their thyroid to where they were able to get off thyroid medication. In my own life, though, you know, I'd been tuning for many years, and end of 2019, early 2020, I found I had breast cancer in my breast. And so, you know, I'd been tuning for a long time and being tuned, and I still got that. And what I had, because I have my thermal imaging camera and we were locked down, so it was kind of, that would be the comedy part in the movie of me trying to run a thermal imaging camera by myself and taking pictures of myself with the laptop here and the camera there. But I could see that I had my root canal, that I had a temporary filling. I was supposed to have done something about it a long time ago, and I was like traveling around. I was like, oh, I'll deal with it later, and I didn't. And so there was a really white hot spot here on my tooth, and then it was all down my lymph nodes and into my left breast. And I was like, oh, this is because of this root canal. And I looked at the like organ chart and what does this tooth connect to? And it connected to the left breast. And so I was like, well, I'm just going to try and get this tooth taken out. Maybe that's going to solve the problem. So, you know, that, which is exactly what happened. I was able to finally in like 2021 was able to get this tooth pulled, and I was doing lymphatic massages the whole time, just kind of clearing out my lymph system, and even took some drops that help clear out your lymph system even more. I can't remember those off the top of my head right now. And that worked.
Okay.
So it was, you know, it was a bad tooth. So, you know, I don't think there's always like a be all end all cure all necessarily type thing. I think there's a lot of issues that can stem from our teeth. And, you know, being
Oh,
here in New York, I've worked with Dr. Jerry Curatola, who's an amazing dentist, and, you know, he's been able to help me continue to, you know, keep my teeth in good order. And you know, I trust him with my life. But you know, I think dental health is very important. And so you can try and do as much emotional and energetic and that type of thing, but also, you know, you really got to make sure you take care of your teeth. So I'm a big proponent of that. And then also parasites. When I was in India, I had 6 different kinds of parasites. I had a tapeworm. That one really like sucked me down. I looked like a scarecrow. And blood flukes, liver flukes, like all the flukes. And so that's another thing that, you know, no matter how much tuning and lasering I was doing, these things living inside of me, you know, I had to go that next step and be able to do like those parasite cleanses. And also heavy metal detox is another one that I recommend, you know, people make sure to get those metals out, and especially with all of this Wi-Fi, you know, metal and microwaves, they don't mix. So being able to get as much metal out of the system. So I don't think it's a cure-all. I think it's useful tools, you know, to add to your repertoire. With the green laser, I find that it's really helped with a lot of emotional trauma. So people who when you think about a memory and your energy field still gets electric, whether it's sadness or it still makes you angry every time you think about it type thing. And you can feel how electric you get just with a thought again. So being able to use the laser, I've had friends who, you know, they found their husband dead on the floor. So every time that image pops into their mind, they would get charged, or if they talked about it to people, their field would get charged. So she said she took the laser, she put it here on her chest, and she thought about the image and also the words as well. So some people are more visual, some are more like language based, but she did both. And she said, Kimberly, now it just feels like information. I don't go through that same emotional roller coaster. And it was the same thing with a friend of mine who cut the tip of her fingertip off with a rotary saw. She said, every time I close my eyes, I'm cutting my fingertip off again. And so I handed her the laser, and less than a minute later, she handed it back to me and she's like, okay, I'm good. And within 3 days, she said she had to use the rotary saw again. And she said, and I wasn't even afraid to use it.
That's
So
great.
being able to help neutralize some of those, past triggers, then, if people clear a memory or a trauma,
Yeah,
then if
Right.
something very similar were to happen to them, they're not going to get phased. They're going to be more coherent and not be as triggered as they might have been if that, word or that memory, kind of stirred them back up. So,
great
trying
to
to
know.
stay as coherent as possible, I think is a big deal.
Did you say?
Just one more, I'm
Oh, go
sorry,
ahead.
I just want to ask you one more thing. I was sitting one time just quiet, and all of a sudden this resonance in my brain started like harmonic sound, and it got louder and louder and louder, and I didn't know anything about it, and I popped right out of my body up at the ceiling, and I'm looking down on the form.
Mm.
Now, this is a natural thing that just happened, or how do you explain? I mean, it happened several times after, but I was scared the first time. How do you explain how that the brain works like that with the sound that resonates like a motor and getting louder and louder and louder? Boom. Did you ever could explain?
I mean, I don't know if I can fully explain out of body experiences, but I think that your energy field, it's like when you dream, are you staying in your body? Is your energy field kind of going off on this adventure? So I don't know. I can't say that I can explain that one, but I feel like our essence can leave the body. Obviously, my brother's had an out of body experience when he was young and in a surgery, and watched his body with the surgery, and so hearing these types of stories, I know that it's these things are possible, but I've never had that experience without um I've had the experience on ayahuasca in Brazil. That's a whole other story, but I can't really explain it just from a meditation standpoint.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, that buzzing is completely normal, the buzzing or the hum.
Yeah, the
Go out of-
hum.
That's, yeah, when you're conscious, that's normal. What I wanted to add in just real quick, when you were talking about drops and you couldn't remember what, medically, was it either chlorine dioxide or selenium?
No, it was from I think it was like Physics Energetica or something like that. They were called Lymph X or something like that, but it wasn't particular
Okay.
names.
Okay, well, thank you guys for the incredible questions, Doreen and E. Really wonderful. My pleasure to Kimberly to introduce you to a member of our group who is a retired surgeon, and he's also doing research in lasers. Leonard, I'm so glad that you came on to say hello. And do you have anything you'd like to share with Kimberly about your work and so forth?
Well, we can get into that later. I missed the first part, but I've listened to her talk since. I got in about 10 or 15 minutes late. I was tied up. And I agree with everything that she said. The laser that I've developed works on different principles than what she's using. However, we have pretty much the same type of results. And it's mine. She talked about the different colors of laser. Everything is frequency. If you understand, as Tesla said, that everything is energy, frequency, and vibration. And what she's using sound vibration, and she's using the green light. My laser uses a blue light, but I don't use it for the laser particularly. The laser itself, in my laser, actually is a carrying wave. I use Tesla technology, but it's a carrier wave that carries in frequencies into the body, and the body itself has the intelligence to, do with it what it may. and it's also very, very low power. I was questioning, by the way, what is the power of your frequent of the power
Less
of your
than
laser?
one, it's less than 1 millivolt, so it's also a low level laser.
Okay, so it's the
Well,
same. That's exactly what I'm
and
using.
I also have a cap that I can put on that attaches to the end of the laser that so you can use the laser as a carrier wave with whatever you want to put in the cap, whether it's supplements or, Bach flower remedies or whatever you want to put into the cap so that you can, put those remedies and shine it through onto a bottle of water, onto your
So you
food,
said,
onto the body, into a bathtub, however you want to carry that information into the body. So for a little bit extra for the laser, you can add that little cap. And then I like to use like quartz crystals. I'll put those in the cap to help to amplify it. Or I like to use raw rubies and just because they've got additional geometry and there's nothing more coherent that we can make than crystals, that are formed by the earth. It's
I agree with you
fascinating.
100%. And I understand completely the effect that you're using with the cap. It's very, in fact, I saw this about 10 or 15 years ago. I can't remember the fellow who developed it. He was initially using a laser and using a similar technique where he had an attachment where he could put different vials on, which were different natural substances. And then somehow, I don't know what happened, but he went broke and he tried to do the same thing using a large flashlight and it didn't work. What I'm using is actually the various frequencies per se, which are taken from natural substances, but incorporating them into the laser. It's almost like a train carrying passengers, and I'm interacting with the biofield of the body, and the biofield, you're transferring knowledge into the body, which is exactly what you're doing. But I never tried it with the green, and the only reason I'm using the blue is because it can carry more information. And as you know, uh, the body is mainly water, which has an infinite amount of possibility to maintain memory, retains memory. So it's basically the
Absolutely.
same thing coming from two different approaches. And I've had uh, very similar results. But how rapid are your results, by the way, that you see?
I mean, it's speed of light. I mean, it
No,
can,
no, I'm talking about, no, no, I agree with that. The reaction in the patient that you're working with.
some of them can be pretty, within seconds. As I
Yeah,
said, for those emotional things, it was like a few seconds. And even like I'll have them shine. I've had somebody shine the laser over different parts of their hands because the whole body's here. And then suddenly this part of their hand, they're like, wow, it's really tingly right there.
right.
And so I show them on a reflexology map, this relates to the stomach and then they're like, well, should I just keep holding it here? Because they hadn't had a bowel movement in 3 days.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, sure, just keep holding it there. And less than 2 minutes later, they're like, it stopped tingling. Can I turn it off? I said, sure. And the next day I get a full report of their bowel movements. So, it's kind of one of those you can follow and feel almost with electricity. Back when the people were having magnets sticking to the injection site for the jabs,
Right.
there was a friend of mine who had my laser, and one of his employees had this magnet that was stuck to his arm, but also the lymph nodes under his arm were so swollen that he couldn't even like raise his hand up to shampoo and shower. And so my friend said he was trying all of these different things, and then he thought, what about my laser? And he had the person hold 4 pieces of magnetic hematite. And then he said he started shining the laser on the arm, and within 15 seconds, the magnet fell off of his arm.
Mm.
So that was quite interesting. But I know some of the research that I was basing using the laser as a carrier wave was Dr. Peter Gariev. He was a Russian
Yes,
scientist out of
I'm familiar with them.
Russia, and he was up for a Nobel Prize in 2020 and then mysteriously died
Yes,
before
I'm
he was ever
very,
to be awarded by it. And one of the last interviews that I saw, he was being interviewed by my friend Glenn Ryan, who might be one of the guys that you're thinking about, because he did some laser using the laser as a carrier wave research as well. And towards the end of the interview, Glenn said, this wouldn't be good for the pharmaceutical industry if, you could just put one pill into the cap and kind of bring it in physics instead of chemistry wise, then people don't have to consume them.
Absolutely.
And Dr. Gariev said, haha, more dangerous in Russia. And so then I was so excited that he was up for this Nobel Prize. And then to find out that like a family friend was like, he died under like in a suspicious way. I was just like, oh my gosh, he even said that in that interview. I started to freak out a little bit. And then I was like, well, this is what I'm doing with my laser is based on his work. So for the last few years, I've kind of happily flown under the radar and kind of been more of a grassroots, people tell other people, but I haven't been, too vocal about using it as a carrier wave because I, value my life and
Well,
so
I keep it
don't
under
get
the
taken
radar.
out.
I mean, I keep it under the radar also. I have not really advertised it. It's been strictly, by word of mouth.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting. I'm very familiar with Peter Gariev.
Yeah.
In fact, he had I don't know if you're aware of it, he had a, uh, a paper about actually working on the DNA. He felt you're familiar with,
Yeah.
the
The
DNA.
frog and salamander larva that he was.
Well, yes, that's one. That's one. That was done by. And I'm an orthopedic surgeon by training. I'm retired, and uh, that experiment was done by the individual who actually invented the pulse electromagnetic instrument that stimulates bone healing for non-unions. But no, the thing that he was talking about, Garyev, was um, uh, actually taking DNA from your from your hair taken when you were first born, and then transmitting the frequency of the DNA into you, which can be done. That's something that could be done. I think you can actually reverse aging if that works. I mean, it's something really that you may want to play around with. There's a
Well,
paper
that's
on
gonna
it.
make me go back home and to my parents' house and have like dig through the baby book so I can find a sample
Yeah.
of my first clipping of my hair
Unfortunately,
when I was a kid, for sure.
unfortunately, I would do. I'm 87 years of age, and I don't have much hair now, but I don't have any clippings when I was a baby. I wish I did, but I think it'd be a very interesting experiment to do, and it can be done using, similar to what you're talking about. You can take you, you can take a natural substance through the light, project it, and project it on your body.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely gonna go try and see if I know my mom was really, I was the youngest of four, so like my sister's baby book's thick, and then my brothers are twins, and they've got really thick ones. But I think by the time the fourth one comes along, it was a little bit like, so I don't mine's not nearly as thick as the rest of them, but I think that there might still be clipping of hair. So that's brilliant. I'm gonna give that a go, and I'll let you know
Yeah,
how that turns out.
I'd
I've
appreciate.
also studied the work of Dr. Ibram Karim. He's a Egyptian architect, and he's works with biosignatures. So these different shapes that can help the body. It's kind of the flow of energy through the kidneys is looks like the top of those columns where top of a column kind of swirls and it goes across and it makes another swirl. That's the kind of geometry of the energy flow through the kidney. So just by drawing those forms, but also projecting those forms. So I've created some they're kind of transparencies with those symbols, and then I shine the laser through some of those onto the body, kind of like the Batman signal. So, whether it's the stomach, I like working with the human attributes of divine names. So he has some biosignatures for truth, justice, compassion. And so if I'm working on the throat, especially, I like to bring in divine truth so people can start speaking their truth so their thyroid starts to vibrate and we can help get them off of thyroid medication just by speaking the truth. And then, there's a lot of people who are, working in court cases or things like that, and they're seeking divine justice. So that's another one that I'll shine. When you can shift things on the spiritual plane, then it can, and biogeometry, they talk about how then it can shift your things on the mental plane. So people start thinking differently. And then when you're thinking differently, then your emotions start to shift and you're not kind of spending as much energy on these emotions, then your vitality body can improve because you're not expending it on these emotions. And then your physical body, since your vitality body is stronger, then your physical body can get stronger. So instead of working, just on the kidneys and stress, being able to shift things on the spiritual plane can be able to shift things on all of the lower planes as well. So I tend to use a lot of those biogeometry forms that relate to more that divine truth, divine compassion,
That's great.
justice,
Yeah,
and bringing that into their field.
I understand exactly what you're doing. I've read about I can't name what you just
Dr.
said.
Ibrahim Karim.
Yeah, the Egyptian. He's the individual from in North Carolina,
Dr. Robert Gilbert.
Gilbert. Yeah, who's brilliant. He's brilliant.
Yeah, he was my teacher. He is amazing.
Yeah, I'd like to talk to you about that. That's very, very interesting stuff. And I can understand exactly. What you're doing, everything is holistic, which is, and you're approaching from a holistic point of view as a practitioner. It's very, very interesting. Anyway, I think
One of the things that I loved about Dr. Ibrahim Karim's work and what really drew me to it was there was a church steeple where they put a cell phone tower into the church steeple in Switzerland in a place called Hamburg. And so the people started having cancers and tumors and miscarriages and even the animals as well. So when they said, oh, it's in your head, it's like, well, the cows are also having miscarriages and also there's a lot more tumors in the cows. And then this ringing in the ears, people were sleeping in their root cellars for 3 years just to get away from that ringing from, that broadcast. And even the birds and the bats stopped flying into that area, so stopped migrating. So that for me, if I woke up with the sound of birds and then suddenly for 3 years I didn't have that sound, that would probably freak me out. So he came and he created a particular geometry. It almost, kind of like in science where there's different shapes and forms. If you're going to broadcast in radio or microwave, you've got to have a different shaped antenna or a different dish to create the right geometry for the waveform.
Mhm.
Same thing with this biogeometry. So he created this particular geometric shape and pointed it at the cell phone tower. And it was changing the quality of the energy. So it was not stopping the broadcast. And so it was almost like using the broadcast like a carrier wave, and it was carrying this higher resonant energy over the town. So it almost turned it into like a healing device. So then the ringing in the ear went away. All of the people who had to get sleep medication, they were able to get off the sleep medication. The tumors went down, the miscarriages went down, the birds and the bats came back. Like that would be enough research for me, just seeing that the birds and the bats have now returned, but I mean, all of these other side effects had gone away. Those, poor people sleeping in a root cellar for 3 years suddenly were like, I feel great. And he was able to do that in a couple of different cities as well. So with that, I was like, as more and more 5G came out with my mentor's research of like what's going on with, AM and FM, and then flash forward and now we've got 5G and 6G. So instead of wanting to try and tear these towers down, I was like, well, why don't I learn this biogeometry so we can create these antennas and turn these things into healing devices? And so, so that was my main draw and pull to study his work. And I remember in the foundations class, he said that in ancient Egypt, these particular temple initiates who used a Jed pendulum, DJED,
Mhm.
they
Mhm.
were known as the Jedi.
Mhm.
I almost fell off the bed. I was like, what? Because I'm a huge Star Wars fan, hence my, Skywalker green lightsaber here. And so I was like, I'm definitely taking the advanced class because I want to learn how to use this Jed pendulum, and I have. So
You're getting
So
into
that was my draw to really taking that course, and it's been mind blowing. I was telling Nick ahead of before we got on, I was like, that was a class where I started to drink from the fountain of knowledge and realized it was like a fire hydrant. It's like one of those where you're like, oh, there's so much more
Right.
for me to learn. And just walking around town, with Julian, I'm like, and you see the way that this is shaped? And do you
Yeah.
see the top and the roof and the crown of this building? So he and I have been kind of going on a little biogeometry, like learning experience, kind of showing him like why these, the corner of this whole building is rounded, or do you see that poison arrow, how it's so pointy and sharp, and how that's cutting through anybody who's standing there. So we wouldn't stand in front of like the really pointy, corners of the buildings when we were waiting to cross the street. We would kind of try and get out of those areas. But it's been really fascinating with how much of that biogeometry is here in New York. Is just like it makes our long walks that much more interesting.
It's almost like, well, it's sort of like feng shui. Everything is interrelated. I wish I was your age so I could. I mean, you're right. The more you know, the more you know. You don't know. Did you
You're
ever?
like, I know nothing.
Did you ever come across Christopher Hill's work?
Yes, yes, I've got a couple of his books, The
Yeah,
Rainbow Body, or I think.
exactly. And he was working on years ago a radionics unit which worked strictly with sacred geometry figures or geometric figures. And in a symbol, much like you talked about, you can pack a lot of energy into it. So it all fits together when you really as you dive in. I mean, we're doing similar things, and the approach is a little bit different, but the ultimate end is pretty much similar.
A lot of people aren't familiar with the work of George Delaware. He had radionics technology about the same time as like
Right.
Rife and Dinshaw Gadiali, in the early 1920s and 30s. And what he was doing, he was brought to court because he was getting blood samples from pregnant women and being able to say that he could find the sex of the baby, if it was going to be a boy or a girl. And then depending on that information, I don't know what was happening to the babies, but he was brought to court because they were like, there's no way um, that he could do this.
Yeah. Well, most of
And
those early investigators like Delaware, at least in this country, were jailed. They were,
well,
they were
they
jailed.
tried to put him in there. And so what he said was, I could even take a picture of your thoughts.
Hmm.
And so the judge said, okay, well, tomorrow morning, if you can take a picture of my thought at 9 a.m. and bring it in at 11, then I'll throw out the case, because he didn't believe that
Mhm.
this thing could do it. So at 9 a.m., the judge took his childhood pocket knife and he opened it. And the next, at 11 o'clock, George Delaware comes in and he's got an envelope, and there's the handle of this pocket knife, and the blade is open, and there's a ribbon of light kind of showing the movement of it opening it. And the judge threw out the case. So it's the thoughtograph of being able to tune into a person and be able to read their thoughts. Now, I don't know how many of you have seen Avatar 2, the second Avatar movie, where they have somebody captured. I'll try not to ruin the movie for anybody, but they have somebody captured and they've hooked them up to this machine, and they're asking them questions, and they're saying, just form a thought. That's all we need is just form a thought, and it'll show up on the screen. And I was
They-
like, oh my gosh, this is the thoughtograph 100 years later that, we already, well, some of you may already know with MK Ultra, they could broadcast thoughts into people's mind, but that's also can act as a receiver and be able
Still
to
doing.
read people's minds as well. So I think this George Delaware technology, which I've never, attempted to use it in that way, but I do have one of his machines that, has kind of been sitting on a shelf. I've been a
Play
little
around with that.
intimidated to work with it, but radionics is something that's also been
It's similar.
fascinating to me for many years.
Are you familiar with Edgar Casey?
Yes,
Thoughts or things?
exactly. Exactly. That was one that Elizabeth Rauscher, that was one of the books that she had given me was Edgar Casey's book.
Yeah.
Just
Anyway,
fascinating.
yeah, I was a student of his when I was a young kid. And
Really?
one of the things that stayed with me all the time is thoughts are things. And you can take it from, that takes you into really holistic medicine when you think about it, because you're actually creating, things around you, but also within your own body.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Guys, thank you so much. This was
I
an
don't want to,
amazing exchange.
this
Really
is,
wonderful.
yeah,
Leonard, you're located in Ohio, is that correct?
yes.
Ohio, right. Just to clarify
And
that.
Nick, I don't want to, this is her time. I don't want to,
No, you've been asking great questions and kind of guiding it into a really fun
Go
place. So
guys,
thank
go.
you, Leonard. I
This is
really
good
enjoyed
stuff.
it.
So please go ahead.
we I don't want to monopolize this. It's her time, but we could talk all day long. I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated with it.
I see Adrian's got her hand raised.
Yeah, you kind of glazed over to the subject of the jetty pendulum. What do you use it for, and what does it look like? I mean, I use pendulums. Is it similar?
The jet pendulum, I don't have it with me. I've kind of, when I travel, I can't bring all of my set of things. It's got a particular shape. So the shape of the pendulum is very much, let me see if I've got no. So the shape of the pendulum is going to determine in biogeometry, what you're going to tune into. So there's certain shapes, whether it's on the mental plane, the physical plane, that it will be able to shape, but it kind of looks like like a keyhole where it kind of comes down like that. It's got the opening at the top and then it kind of comes down to this and then it's kind of round on the bottom. So you're measuring disturbances in the force. So if you're finding an area where there's like a geopathic stress, for example, where there's like an underground, like energy that's flowing underground that's creating a shear stress, whether it's like an underground water line or water vein that's going underneath the person's bed or their office space, that kind of shear stress that's created underneath the ground, it's going to come up, and can affect the person's energy field. So being able to have that pendulum where you can measure a disturbance in the force.
Does it vibrate?
Pendulum.
Does it vibrate when it just detects a
spin.
disturbance? It'll spin. Now, what's
It'll
it made of? A particular?
This one's made out of wood, and I don't know if it might be made out of a particular type of wood, but that I got through the biogeometry course. You have to be in the advanced course to even be able to purchase it.
Interesting. Okay, thank you. Oh,
Yeah.
one other thing I wanted to add, you were talking about how the red light therapy heals skin or is good for skin, but it's aggravating to one's consciousness maybe. When I was having,
Go ahead, sorry.
when I was having skin troubles, somebody, Kiwani left psoriasis, he recommended green and orange light combined. Have you ever done color combinations with light therapy?
Yeah, I've had people, not necessarily at the same time, but I've had people, especially with neuropathy, where they've been using a red laser, or if they want to use the red laser on their face for the beauty aspect, then I suggest that they follow up with green to try to help bring it back to balance. So if you're wanting to do that kind of red stimulating, but then kind of follow up with green light to help bring it more into balance. So I have done kind of recommended people do that. Same thing with blue. Or if people are using a color of light that's going to kind of slow that part of the body down, then let's at least use green to help bring it back to kind of a neutral afterwards, so that it's not going to keep bringing it down.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Excellent. Okay, Doreen, you're going to be the last one because we're running out of time, but go ahead. You got to unmute yourself, Doreen. Doreen, you got to unmute yourself, please.
There's a guy that hasn't spoken yet. He's waving his hand with SOL.
Julian.
I mean, I can go, but he hasn't spoken.
No, he just muted his microphone. Hold on.
Okay.
Nope.
All right.
Julian, if you can hear us, unmute.
Yes.
There you
There we
go.
go.
There you are.
Okay. Just want to say, Nick, that this is one of the most extraordinary shows. There's so much treasure in
Oh
this
boy.
program of information. And I just want to say that as you think, so you are.
Yes.
As a numerologist of over 45 years now, and we're in 2025, which is a 9, 20259. And the 9 is the one with the top 0, one with higher mind, one with God consciousness. We're being asked, as you think, so you are.
Awesome.
And the veil is totally becoming so thin now that we're in contact not only with our own multi-universe, but other multi-universes. And what's important is, and it comes to mind what David Lynch said when he was asked, how does he get his ideas for his movies? And he goes, they just come. And then I don't just allow them to leave. I start writing them down. So what I'm asking the audience to do is use the tools. I've been using the Spectrotron laser, and it's an extension of myself. And it's extraordinary because and it's interesting because in Kabbalah, the ancient teachings, green is the color of healing and the healer. In numerology, it's the 4 vibration, or a 22-4 master vibration. And what's important is to understand that these tools exist. And when you're around someone who is hurting, their field is relating a message and putting it out of, I'm hurting, but this is what you can do to heal me through words, through some tools, through some method. I learned that when I was living in Brazil for 8 years, working with psychic healers in the 90s. Our body is such an amazing source and vibration of resonance and frequency, giving and receiving energies, a receiver as well as a transmitter, that it's important that we take the time to, as David Lynch said, if a thought comes, he writes it down. If a thought comes to you when you're around someone who's sick, take it and move with it and go with it. And use your Spectrotron laser, use your tuning forks, use your voice in tuning. Understand the numbers. Pythagoras, father of mathematics, numerology, everything in the universe is number. That number has a frequency, has a language to it. Allow yourselves in 2025 to really embrace that oneness with yourself and that of God consciousness, and allow yourself. And what's beautiful is I've done tuning, the tuning with Kimberly, which is amazing, especially when she brings you to the infinite. She brings you to the infinite and you come back and you're working with not only your body, but with your wave, with your frequencies, and you're realizing that you're not your body, that you're this amazing, magnificent energy. And blessings to you, Nick. Thank you so much for this program. To you, Kimberly, to you, my friend Leonard, and all of your work and everyone else. It's a blessing just experiencing this beautiful podcast. Blessings and thank you.
Julian, thank you so much too. You are the best. You're an amazing man. Carol, I know you had your hand up, so please, if you go ahead, I'll put you.
Oh, okay. Very quick. It's very quick. I'm apologize. I got here late. But I did hear you, Kimberly, I did hear you mention the name George Delacour and the court case. I'm familiar with Ted Sirios. I don't know if you mentioned him and his thought photographies. Can you enter the full name of George Delacour in the chat? I'd like to read more about him. Thank you.
George Delaware. And
Oh,
I
Delaware.
think what has happened, because I've tried to, in the past, I've been able to find his, the photo, the actual photo that he had sent to the judge, and it's been wiped. So I believe that's how to spell it. George Delaware.
Yeah, that's
Thank
right.
you, Kimberly. Thank you very much. I want to extend an invitation to everyone here and beyond, to the rest of our membership, that the first Sunday of March, Leonard is my featured guest. So we can continue this. Kimberly, if you're available, please, I would love to have you on. And Leonard, we're looking forward to your presentation and the Q&A after that. What a wonderful program this was on so many levels. Thank you all. Kimberly, you are amazing. You really are. And I'm looking forward, Kimberly, maybe a little later in the spring or early summer for a part two, because I think it's warranted for sure.
I would love that. This has been such an honor to speak to your group. They've asked some really great questions and given some really good insights and feedback, and I would love to do another part two. Thank you so much.
Oh, that's excellent news. We love good news, and you have been amazingly good news. This is Nick Curto, and for Disclosure Network New York, if you'd like to find out more about our membership, and I hope you will, you can contact me through my email directly, and I'm going to give you that right now, and I'll do it twice. So for clarity, my email address is NICKNYNY1, that's the numeral 1, at gmail.com. I'm going to repeat it, NICKNYNY1 at gmail.com. Our motto, right from 27 years ago when we first started Disclosure Network New York, a grassroots organization looking as a deep dive into ET, UFO, and paranormal phenomenon, and all that goes with that. And there's a lot. And I'm so proud of the group for sure. And we have a website, dnny.info. You can also go there and learn more about us. Thank you all. What a total joy, absolute joy. You've made my day. You've made my month. Thank you all, and much love to you all. Much love.
Thank you, Nick.
I think we are out of it. I believe we are. Okay, guys. Take care. And Leonard, we look forward very much to your presentation coming up next month.
Thanks, Nick. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, take care, guys.